And now, live from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you're watching My Fellow Americans with your host, Spike Cohen.
Welcome to the show. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, please. Thank you so much. No, I clap for you. Thank you. Thank you. We got a great... thank you. Keep clapping. Clap if you believe. How would we know you believe if you didn't keep clapping? Welcome to My Fellow Americans. I am literally Spike Cohen. I'm so happy to have you with us tonight on Wednesday, the 19th of December, the year of our Lord 2018. This is a Muddied Waters media production. Check us out on Facebook, on YouTube. Check us out on Instagram, SoundCloud, on Twitter. We're on iTunes. We're on something called Stitcher. We are on Google Play, I'm told. Check us out. Check us out on muddiedwatersoffreedom.com. Check this out that you're watching right now. Continue checking it out. Muddied Waters Media, we're all over the place. Come check us out. Thank you once again to Kroger for my delicious purified drinking water that I drink on this and most episodes of My Fellow Americans. That is delicious Kroger water. The intro and outro music that I use for this and every episode of My Fellow Americans is from the talented Mr. Joe Davi. That's Jodavi. You can check him out on Facebook, on SoundCloud. Check him out on his Bandcamp. Buy all of his music. It's like $10 to buy everything the man has made. Buy all of it. It's great music. Mr. Joe Davi, thank you so much. Shout out to Tehran Turks' mom and him as always. Guys, I'm really excited about my next guest. She's a First Amendment attorney who has been featured on PBS's To the Contrary and NewsHour. She's been on RT. She's been on One America News Network. She's been on TV One. She's been on American Urban Radio Network and other outlets. She has served on the advisory council of the Project 21 Black Leadership Network. She was a legislative counsel in the House of Representatives. She was a legal and legislative policy advocate and strategic outreach officer at the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education. When was the last time any of you even did a pull-up, by the way? She has served as an advisor and counsel on countless boards and organizations. She's currently the director of the Center to Protect Free Speech. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show the beautiful and talented Ms. Shelby Susan. Shelby, thank you so much for joining My Fellow Americans.
Hey, Spike. Thank you so much for having me. I love this show. You're doing great work. I really like it.
Thank you. I try to do great work. I appreciate that. You're doing great work as well. We've been friends for 4 or 5 years now?
For a minute.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been literally a minute that we've been friends. And I'm really excited to have you on. By the way, guys, if you have any questions or thoughts for me or Shelby, please leave them in the comments, and we will let you know if you are right or wrong. So the first thing that I always ask my guests when they come on is two things. One is, how would you define your beliefs, political beliefs, ideological beliefs? And then how would you say you got to them? Would you say it was like an aha moment, or was there sort of this steady evolution towards them? Tell me about that.
I would define my ideology as I don't care what you do so long as I don't have to pay for it. If I have to pay for it, then I have so many opinions and you're not going to like any of them.
Right. So just pay for it yourself. Right.
For it yourself. I think it was just kind of a natural progression. So I'm from the city of Detroit, not the suburbs. I'm actually from the city. And I'm biracial, so I'm half black, I'm half white, and I grew up in a single parent home. But I also had my grandparents with me, and I just kind of learned at a young age that this idea of helping everybody through government programs was not the answer, because I grew up around people that were on and had access to every government program imaginable, and It wasn't doing anything. But it was also realistic, and I understand that when I moved to the suburbs, I saw a big difference. I went from a school where the maps and the textbooks were outdated and the map still said Soviet Union. And then I went to the suburbs where kids had 2 laptops. So this idea that we all start at the same place is very naive. But I remember watching the George Bush and Clinton debates, and Clinton just kept discussing Black people and people who lived in inner cities as if we were victims and incapable. and we needed them for everything. And George Bush was just naive and thought, you just work hard and run your race and everything will work out great for you. And I
Right.
thought they were both wrong, but I knew that I would rather have someone think that I'm capable than someone think that I'm not. And that's when I decided that I was a conservative, but not for the same reason most people are. I'm a conservative because I don't trust the government. I don't trust the man, and I want to be left alone.
So it's because it's kind of pandering, right? Like to be like, I mean, again, I'm an anarchist, but when I see people the way that they argue against voter ID, for example, and I don't really care. I mean, I would have no problem with people going in and voting 100 times at this point. Like I don't really care. But the arguments against it are like, well, black people they don't know how to get IDs and they don't really have internet, and it's like just the way they talk about it. I'm like, how many black people do you know? Like, where are you getting this concept that black people don't have the wherewithal to like do basic stuff that pretty much all of us do at this point? So it sounds like that was part of what kind of turned you, or at least if not what made you a conservative, at least what turned you off from, I guess, what the left was saying about people of color.
Yeah, I mean, just growing up and learning my history, the thing that I was most proud of about being Black was how strong we were through the face of every horrible, disgusting thing that was systematically set up to
Right.
keep us down, and yet we still got through it.
Right.
There's still a long way to go, but this idea now that we're all incapable and it's like Scarlet from Gone with the Wind and oh, woe is me and I need the white liberal to save me is I can't deal with it. It's ridiculous. And I don't think most people believe it, but I say that to say just because I'm not a liberal does not mean that I'm pro GOP. I think the Republican Party is a joke. I think that they have been an utter disappointment and disaster, and they are kind of the original pajama boy. Remember when Obama had his pajama boy for Obamacare?
Yes, right.
That's what the Republican Party is.
This is pajama boy season, right? Like this is we're coming into when we're supposed to be getting into our pajamas and telling our loved ones to sign up for ACA. So that, yeah, no, it's, and I get where you're coming from on that it's not even, like you said, it's not even that you're supportive of the Republicans. It's just what the other side's peddling is like, you can't reconcile that. And it's interesting because what you said is very common with people of color, that they find pride in all of the things, and understandably so, all the things that they and your ancestors were able to overcome. Almost all of those things either came from government or from people that were protected by government. You think of the Fugitive Slave Acts or systematic denial of access to the land giveaway programs when they were expanding out into the Midwest, or the Tuskegee experiments, or the way that veterans that fought in World War II came home and were lynched. Those types of those were all government things, and to now be told, well, you can't really do anything on your own, and you need help from the government, the same government that created all these problems for you in the first place. We're going to help you. You can totally trust us now. We can help you.
Well, the best part is, and I keep asking people who believe in this nonsense to show me. So a lot of my white liberal friends, who I love dearly, I love them. They're sweet, they're wonderful people. But all these people who tout all this nonsense, I always say to them, there is a systematic problem right now. You've got the most educated group of women in America happen to be African-American women like myself. And we have this woman on our back that is just holding us down for real. And her name is Sally Mae. And if you would take progressive privilege, and instead of, running your mouth about how privileged you are and your white privilege and your white guilt, just pay off my loans, pay off my friends' loans. I can give you the names of 10 women right now that need their loans paid off. You can go to daddy's credit card. I don't care.
Right.
And I'll give you a certificate that says that you're diverse and,
you're an official ally of.
Yeah, but they never want to do that. They never want to actually do that. But, you're more than welcome to. You guys can hit me up after the show. Sally Mae does not care. She does not play. She's the real deal. But
we're gonna have to put that in the show notes, your Cash App ID or whatever, or your PayPal, so that they can start for all progressives that are watching this that want to demonstrate your commitment to the fight of people of color. Here's your chance. Right off the bat, you can help directly.
or just pay off any bills that you'd like. I mean, I would prefer Sally Mae, but I have tons of bills that you're more than welcome to pay, and I can send you a little note of gratitude like those Save the Children cards.
You can do updates like how is that them? I think it's like World Vision or whatever. You can send notes like today I made a craft. Here's a picture of the craft I made today. So that's
Yeah, we could be pen pals.
what's that?
We could be pen pals. It would be great, and
Yeah,
they
no,
could.
exactly. Yeah, and I mean if they keep wanting to give, then I want to get in on this too. So looking at the comments, they're going about how I thought they would initially. We get a lot of people saying you're hot. So that's good. So that's good stuff. So where are my notes? There are my notes. So okay, cool. So it sounds like you've pretty much been here from the beginning, right? Like it sounds you didn't have like a phase of being a progressive, and then one day you were like, no, I don't support this anymore. Or
Oh yeah, I've thought this way since I was at least 3 years old. Yeah.
nice. And so I have a feeling this might be the same thing. Have you always wanted to be an attorney? Like was that from the beginning you wanted to pursue law, or was that something you figured out later on?
Well, I originally wanted to be a mermaid because I loved Ariel. And I first of all want to say that I'm really upset with my mom and my family because if they would have let me feel how I feel, then I should be a mermaid and society should have to pay for all those surgeries. But
I
that's
agree.
not. And then I wanted to be a veterinarian, and then I realized you couldn't save all the animals. So forget that. But then I read two really, really cool things. I read the Constitution and the Declaration, so three, sorry. And then I read this biography that was made for kids about Sojourner Truth. And I just thought it was so cool that this woman who technically didn't have any standing, right? She had no legal standing, still had the ear of Abraham Lincoln. And I just
No, I
thought,
know. Yeah.
oh, yeah, I just thought that was cool. And I don't know why. And I fell in love with the Constitution. And then when I went to high school and college, I got a degree in political theory, constitutional democracy, because I'm a dork and I loved it. And the thing that I fell in love with the most was the book Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson.
Right.
And in
Yeah.
there's a chapter on the politics of society. And he says in the book, I'm paraphrasing, but basically that if government allowed Black people to read and understand the Constitution and understand the rights therein, they wouldn't be able to hold us back anymore. And I
Right.
was
Right.
like, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. And I understood then that the whole system, growing up in Detroit, the lack of resources, society, that it was all designed to make me think that I was nothing more than this victim. And come hell or high water, I was gonna, fight or die trying. So that's why I do what I do.
Very good stuff. And I actually want to pivot a little from what my notes were because I really didn't consider this before. So you are a mixed race, as you had said. You're half white and half Black. Would you say that because I get a lot of different things when I talk to people that are mixed race or light skinned or whatever, and some say that they experience worse or different types of discrimination than just a, I guess, quote unquote, standard Black person. And others say, no, it's much better to be, to not be, completely Black or whatever. What would you say your experience has been? And was it different in, for example, when you were in Detroit compared to when you were in the suburbs?
Yes, very different experiences. So I do think that there's still this colorism in this country, right?
Right.
Lighter skin is still valued in some areas, which I never understood growing up.
Yeah.
So when you grow up with a white mother, she doesn't know the difference. So she's just all focused on, as my mom would say, we all have Black babies because we love afros. It's sad, but it's true. But for me, growing up in Detroit, Michigan's a very segregated state, probably one of the most segregated in the country. The North
Right.
is a very racist place, I think, compared to the South in a lot of ways. They're just more politically correct about it. But I got a lot of racism growing up, probably the most from poor whites and Black women growing up. A lot of it under stuff like your hair, or I can remember a girl in third grade, I won't call her name out, but her name was Miranda, her last name. And I'll never forget, she came up to me and said that I needed to decide if I was a nigger or a cracker. And I
Oh,
had
wow.
no idea what that meant. And I went home to my white grandfather, World War II Marine. He was like 75 at the time, poor guy. And probably the only man in America who wished, their granddaughter would come home and ask them where babies came from.
Right,
And I
right,
asked
right.
Frank, am I a nigger or a cracker? And he just looked at me because poor man had no idea what to say, no matter what he
Right.
said.
Well, yeah. What would you say to a? How old were you? This was third grade.
Would be like second or third grade, maybe.
So you're like 7, 8 years old, coming home and asking this, right?
And I just, asked a question, and he just
Right.
looked at me and said, "People are gonna hate you for a million different reasons, but in this household, there's no excuses, and you're just Shelby." And I was like, "All right, cool, keep it moving," and that was it. So yeah, I would say as a kid, it happened a lot. It kind of like an identity crisis. You weren't quite sure, and then I just got fed up with everybody trying to put me in a box. And then in high school, we moved to a majority white area. And that was a whole different experience for me because I grew up, with my white family and they weren't naive and stupid. They kind of had to learn things.
Right.
So I remember I had this crush on this one guy and his mom always let me come over his house when she wasn't there. And my mom was like, "Why are you letting my daughter over the house?" And she's like, "Oh, they're just friends." And this woman it never occurred to her that me and her son were making out in the basement because, I was black. So,
Right.
so
Right. Right.
it's had its perks.
That's funny. Yeah, I actually would love to do an episode where where I get into the stuff with colorism because I've read about it, and the U.S. is not, and even the Western world is not the only place that has colorism. It's huge in India. It's huge in East Asia. In Africa, you have people, Africa and in the West Indies, you have people that are using bleach, and it's easy enough to blame it on white people, but the reality is, it looks like, my theory is that at one point, what lighter skin was tied to success because it meant that you weren't having to be outside as often. You weren't having to work outside, and therefore your skin was lighter and your kid's skin was lighter. And so I think there's sort of this, and it's kind of continued to today. There's sort of this either conscious or subconscious tie of lighter skin with being successful, being, I guess, lack of a better word, better. I'm sure smarter people than me have deconstructed it, but that's my theory. So it's an interesting thing. But so that's what got you into. So you got into law, and once you were in there, and of course I named off all the stuff that you've done. You've not just worked in free speech, but is that sort of your prime? I assume that's your kind of your biggest passion.
Yeah. So I probably got into free speech after working on Capitol Hill. So I worked on a whole range of domestic policy issues, but particularly education policy was always my passion because I grew up in an inner city
Right.
and knew that I did not have the same access to opportunities that the kid across 8 Mile did growing up.
Hmm.
And I knew that I was very blessed and thankful to get an opportunity to go somewhere else, but it shouldn't have to be my mom having to pick up and move and go to a completely different county just to get me an opportunity. And
Right.
I can
Right.
going to school that first day and with my white mother and the counselors trying to convince my mom that I needed additional testing and other things just because of the color of my skin and where I grew up. They didn't see me, they saw a zip code. So I know
Oh,
that
wow.
that systematic stuff is still real. But I got into free speech because when I was working on civil rights issues, I started to see a change in culture and this idea that the First Amendment was tied to everything and anything white. And if you were for it in any given way, then you were anti-black, you were racist, you were a bigot. And I kind of felt again like that kid, this 6-year-old who just loved the Constitution, no reason why, I just did. And I was really concerned with what I was seeing in the field when I researched it. I mean, quite frankly, I'm one of the only minorities practicing First Amendment law. I believe I'm the only Black woman. There's very few women. There's very few people of color at all. It's a field that's predominantly men, white men, 50 and older. And so a lot of that is the field's fault itself. It hasn't done a good job of recruiting people, of trying to connect with people from different backgrounds. They just keep quoting John Stuart Mill, and then woke up one day and they don't understand why college kids are saying your support for free speech is support for white supremacy. I've given lectures myself where I've had students hold up signs that say I'm for the white domination of something. I don't know.
Right. Of speech.
Yeah, but there
Or
is
for
some
white speech.
there is some truth to it. It's just like, when Barack Obama became president, there was a need for that. It was finally, growing up, you never had the only person that I could look up to somewhat in what I wanted to do was Condoleezza Rice. And now young men of all different colors, but particularly Black men, actually have something to look at, right or wrong, like Obama or don't like Obama. That's a positive thing.
It's what
So
he represented, right?
yeah, and I just felt the need to do that within my own field. If more people see people who look like me, maybe they'll go into First Amendment law, because we need more people that look like me.
Yeah, I mean, the prickly thing with free speech, and we're going to obviously get more into this, is that in order to truly have free speech, you have to allow the most reprehensible things for the most part. I mean, not calling for people to be killed or something like that, but you have to allow for what 99.9% of us would agree is a horrific opinion to have. And so, for example, when they say, well, free speech is hate speech, it's like, no, free speech includes what you would what many or most of us would consider to be hate speech or horrific speech. But if you start there and say, okay, well, if you believe that, for example, and I'll use Jews because I'm Jewish, that Jews are terrible and that Jews are bad and we should stay away from Jews. If we say, okay, you can't say that, you can't offend Jews with what you say, well, then now you also have to say you can't offend Muslims with what you say, and then you have to say you can't offend Christians with what you say, and you can't offend Black people, and you can't offend white people, and you can't offend Hispanics, and you can't offend this and that, and you can't offend LGBT people, and before you know it, you've created a really an increasingly narrow range of what you're allowed to say, and worse than that, you're putting politicians in charge of deciding what's offensive to people.
Well, of course, and let's be honest here, though. The people who would be making these decisions, who define what the speech is, ironically, would be these same white liberals that feel the need to save us for ourselves. So
right.
Constantly hearing, particularly, I think the most guilty culprit of this are white liberal women, right? Oh, well, you can't say that. You can't do this. We're here to protect you. We're here for you. But none of them were out there for Black Lives Matter, but all of a sudden we're part of their movement when they have this women's march and the pink pussy hats, which I think is racist right there, right? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I was...
The hat is racist?
Well, someone had an article how the color pink may not necessarily match up with every woman's genitalia color, so therefore it is racist, and I just think it's hilarious. But I always try to tell people that free speech is like Thanksgiving dinner with your family, right?
Right.
You've got the crazy uncle. We all know who it is. If you don't know who the crazy uncle is in your family, it's probably you.
Yeah, I'm the crazy uncle. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got the grandmother that maybe has one too many sips of wine and just keeps it way too real.
Right.
You've got the siblings who don't get along, and maybe the one cousin who you actually like, and you're just like, please, Lord, just let's get through this dinner and we'll be good to go.
Right.
That's speech. You have to take the crazy grandmother along with the cousin that you like.
Right.
It just is what it is. Or it's not Thanksgiving dinner, right? And that's just how this works. That's how the system works. Every single great thing that's been achieved in this country has been a result of people saying things that the majority said was hate speech. For example, when people said women deserve the right to vote, you can look this up in the records in the archives. You had members of Congress and senators saying that this was horrific and it was going to lead to violence in the home and blah, 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 blah. And when people had this crazy idea that, Black people should have the right to vote and not be lynched just because they were trying to be human beings in society,
right.
People said, no, don't get out of line. That's hateful rhetoric. Stop. So you have to, every great movement in history, not just American history, has started from everyday people with the ability to run their mouths. It's the one tool that doesn't discriminate based off of class or gender or anything else. Sojourner Truth had the president's ear, and she was a nobody in legal society.
Right.
So think about that.
It's very true. And the thing is, again, going back to, no one really trusts the government. Very rarely do I meet someone who unironically trusts the government. They might say the government needs to do this or do that, but they don't trust the government. And so, for example, when they'll say, we need to have laws about this and that, to stop offensive speech, and I'll say, okay, well, Donald Trump's going to be president till at least the end of 2020, barring the fastest impeachment in history. Barring that, he's going to be president at least for the next 2 years. So what you're saying is that you want Donald Trump and the Republican-controlled Senate, for the most part, to and whoever Donald Trump puts in charge of this commission you want to have created to decide what's offensive and what shouldn't be allowed to be said. And Donald Trump very often goes on Twitter and says what he doesn't think should be allowed to be said. So I'm thinking maybe we need to rethink exactly who it is. It's not your best friend that's going to be deciding this, or you that's going to be deciding this. It's going to be often people that you hate and distrust and compare to Nazis, and it's going to be the police that you also hate and distrust and compare to Nazis who will be enforcing it, and they'll be using the same level of force that they always use.
Exactly. So I used to work a lot with education policy. I still do. But when you saw the last couple of years with all of these protests on college campuses, because there's nobody more oppressed than a college student who's paying $120,000 a year for a social sciences degree, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But there was this big plateau, or this awakening moment where students were literally saying that they were oppressed and afraid to go to school because people had written Trump with chalk, right? And I spoke to this one class. I went back to Michigan State, my where I went to school, and the student said that. She goes, he's a racist and da da da. And when I see his name, it triggers me. And so first I explained to her that no, Sally Mae is the real demon in your life. But outside,
long after Trump is dead, Sally Mae is going to be coming to your door every month. Yeah.
Yeah, she'll still be there. But more importantly is, okay, so you've got, Barack Obama right now, cool. But Trump is now going to be your president. So what do you think, if you really believe these things, right, what do you think the first thing that he's going to do? And you would have think that I hit this woman in the face. And she just kind of looked and said, oh my gosh. And I said, well, that's why you need free speech, so you can continue to write chalk about how he's a Nazi.
Right, exactly. Like all the things you want to say about, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's probably the best thing, is to go from one radical extreme to the other. You've got, Barack Obama, who, by the way, was actually very good on campus speech issues. He would speak to college students and tell them to use their words and, get a backbone. And I loved him for that.
Yeah, he's still doing that. Like, he talks about that often, that this safe space approach to speech is actually counterproductive, and you're actually emboldening the people that you want to stop. You're actually making them, because they're the ones out on the street while you're in this room playing with dolls or whatever to feel better. They're the ones out there canvassing and creating they're growing their influence while you're basically hiding from them.
Exactly. And I always try to tell people too, I don't understand why you give people so much of your emotional power. I love it when I had, like I told you, I had a couple people holding up signs and just really angry at me. And I'm thinking, I'm a 33-year-old woman from Detroit, Michigan. Why are you wasting your energy on me? I
Right.
promise you I'm not that important. It is not that deep. There are bigger battles in your life to fight. But I'm really impressed and feel,
I was gonna say you're a big deal. You're a big deal.
Yeah, it was kind of, yeah. But honestly, it's I don't understand why people, and I say this to a lot of my liberal friends about everything. Why are you giving Trump or anybody, even when I worked with the Charlottesville issue, and I had students reach out to me and they said, we want to counter protest the Nazis coming to campus. And I said, cool, I'll make sure you guys can do that right and do that safely. But I got a better idea. Why don't you go enjoy your day? Why don't you go drink from every water fountain you can find in the city? Go shop, go skip, go sing Kumbaya, do something. But I don't understand why you're giving these people your power.
Right.
Why? If people would have just ignored it.
The second Charlottesville, no one really paid much attention to it, and it kind of came and went like nothing happened. And there was another thing too. It was after Charlottesville. It was in there were two events. One was in Massachusetts, and it had nothing to do with those same groups. It was mostly like libertarian groups talking about like, it was one group that was like peaceful parenting and one that was anti-circumcision. Like, I mean, they were not like, you know, the groups that came to Charlottesville. And but then there was another one that it was the Charlottesville people, and for whatever reason it just didn't catch on as much. And you know, a few hundred people went there and did their thing and then left, and no injuries, no one got hurt, and it was like, and no one just converted to Nazism. Like, no one converted to the alt-right or whatever. Like, they did their thing, they said their piece, they had their tantrum in public about, you know, being replaced by, I don't know, reasonable people, and then they went about their day. And it's like you said, but they like you said, they have that right to protest if they want. The thing I always go to, like, for example, with gun control, when someone will say, well, you know, the government needs to, you know, restrict firearms and stuff like that, and I'm like, okay, are laws disproportionately enforced against people of color? Yes. Does that disproportionately result in them going to jail? Yes. Is Donald Trump currently the president? Yes. Okay. So then how many more people of color do you want Donald Trump to put in cages before you feel sufficiently safe from gun violence? And I never get I've never gotten a number yet. But I wanted to ask you.
In that argument are people from the suburbs who've never had to walk home late at night because they've worked 2 double shifts, this woman over here,
Right.
in a bad neighborhood trying to get home at night. These are always a bunch of women whose mommy and daddy paid their bills while they were, you know, getting their gender studies degree. So,
yeah, they have a very skewed concept of self-protection, and you know, I'm not going to get into it too much, but that's not the only thing that you know, the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment actually wasn't written for home defense or for you know, shooting, you know, hunting. It was something put in place to placate the anti-federalists who didn't want to switch from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution, in that if things got too bad, they could start shooting at this new government. I mean, that was really what it was for. But anyway, we're not going to go too deep into that because I will get real excited. So now you're with the Center to Protect Free Speech. Obviously, I mean, it says what it does. You're directing a center that protects free speech. But what specifically are like the kinds of actions and things that you take there on a day-to-day basis?
sure. So I work specifically with state lawmakers because the First Amendment applies to the states via the 14th Amendment.
Right.
And as everybody should know, but they don't, your feelings do not matter. And you can't force somebody to not say something because it hurts your feelings. The First Amendment prohibits the government from being able to punish you or treat you differently as a result.
Right.
So I work specifically with public areas, so mainly right now college campuses, obviously, but public universities.
Right.
So if a private university wants to say you don't have free speech, they're more than welcome to.
That's their
But
private property, right?
But if your state institution says that you can't have free speech, they would be in violation.
Right.
I also work on commercial speech and donor privacy and protection issues. So, for example, our ability to donate to the causes that we believe in is a part of freedom of association, which is incorporated from the NAACP versus Alabama case, which basically Alabama didn't want, you know, a bunch of Black people organizing and trying to defend their rights.
Right.
And where they tried to go after the donors, many of whom were coming from New York. And they thought if they could reveal the names of people's, their names and their addresses and their phone numbers, then they could intimidate them and stop them.
Demonize them as being out of carpetbaggers or whatever. Yeah.
And, you know, kill them, because that's what Alabama was doing back then. So,
right.
So that's what I work on. And I spend most of my time helping lawmakers understand the First Amendment itself, the restrictions that are placed on them, and then help them with policies so they don't overreact. So, for example, when you saw last year was crazy, I got to deal with the NFL removing Confederate statutes and crazy people blocking freeways, all like in one 2-month period. It was fabulous. But I help lawmakers not overreact. So a lot of the time there's already laws on the books, and I'm one that believes in a limited government. Our organization believes in limited government.
Right.
So I try to get people to not react and instead enforce the laws on the books, i.e. fire the police chief if he's not going to arrest people for blocking an intersection, instead of trying to go after civilians. I believe you hold the government accountable first.
Well, and that's a good point, because you can pass these laws that say, blocking a highway is a felony or whatever. If the police already aren't really doing much about it, what makes you think they suddenly are? And then the other thing was, I saw where they would like pass rules that like legalized running over protesters and stuff like that. I'm like, first of all, the first time, there's no way this isn't going to be challenged. It's one thing if someone's life you feel like your life is in danger. Like I've seen these things where like Antifa surrounds a car and starts smashing it with rocks or whatever. That if that person peels off and people get run over, then people get run over. Like I get that, but it's another thing to be like, I'm late to work, and you just mow through some people that are protesting. And there are like I think in North Carolina, like there are some states where it's questionably possibly legal. So that's interesting. I'm glad to hear that you're doing stuff at the state level too. One thing we talk about a lot on this show is that we focus on federal oppression and federal infringement on our rights, because that's more sexy and more sexy's the wrong word. Sexy.
No, sexy is the right word. That's the right word.
It's well, infringement isn't sexy, but it's more not using my words today. It's more, it catches more headline catching. So Donald Trump is doing this to us, or Barack Obama is doing this to us. Everyone knows who that person is. It's less sexy. I'll keep saying sexy. What do I care? It's less sexy when it's county councilman such and such, or the mayor of some town in Iowa or whatever. But yet, those are the same cops that'll come and shoot you over it. Like, so much oppression that happens to us on our day-to-day basis is carried out at the local level. We focus so much, at state and federal levels because it's more recognizable and it gets more attention. But it's actually like your neighbor that ran for mayor and then got a power trip is potentially more of a day-to-day threat to you than Trump will ever be.
It's very true. So most of your power actually is in the states. A quick constitutional 101, we have a federalist system for a reason. There's a reason we have an electoral college. There's a reason that we have 50 states and not just one big landmass called America.
Right.
The states were supposed to be the original beacons where 90% of all authority was originating from.
Right.
Obviously, we lost that balance, but still everything from police, fire, your education system, higher education, your basic rights, property rights, all of these things originate for the most part at the state level. So one of the things I always ask people is, if you know who the Speaker of the House is, great. But if you don't know who the Speaker is of your state legislature, that's a problem.
Right.
90% of your state governments supply your higher education system with the appropriation funds. Right. So people are up here, conservatives are the most guilty of this. I go to school board meetings all the time. I never see people from the constantly say, we have to shut down the Department of Ed. They don't do anything. But they have no idea who is on the appropriation committees in their state legislature. They have no idea who's on the state committee for their education system, their judiciary system, and then they get upset about drugs or this, that, and the other, and they have no idea who's actually in power. It's actually quite terrifying. Especially
since, again, that they're the ones that it's. I think people don't think about, like, it's your neighbor that like has a power trip. It's sort of like, everyone knows that there's that, couple neighbors in their HOA who, are forcing everyone to have the same fence color or whatever. But, they don't realize it's that same type of personality that then becomes mayor, county chair, school board members and chairs and so forth. And they wield an incredible amount of power. It's localized. It's not as broad as the federal government, but it's way more immediate and directly affecting your life. And just as importantly, or more importantly, even the federal stuff, more often than not, it's the city. More often than not, if you have a government gun pointed at your face, or even just a government gun holder in your face telling you to do something, they're an employee of the city, the county, or the state. Very rarely, unless you're doing some real interesting stuff, very rarely do you have a federal agent, stopping you from doing something. It's a city cop, county cop, state cop. So that's very interesting to me. I have a question to you, because I was thinking I would already have an answer to this now, and I think I have to actually force this question out of you. What, if any, limit would you say there may be to speech? Now, obviously, like, I'm gonna kill you would be a limit. Like, if making threats and things like that. Outside of that, do you think that there is any reasonable limit to what people can or cannot say?
So yes, there's no such thing as a pure free speech in our society. Just like you said, you can't make true threats. You can't, threaten to blow up a school. We all know these basic things. A lot of people use the random phrase "can't shout fire" in a movie theater. That's not necessarily the right legal analysis, but it works.
Because you kind of can. Yeah, right.
But this thing at the government level, and it's called in legal analysis, and it's called time, place, and manner restrictions. And what this basically means is the government, when it comes to free speech, what we call fundamental rights, the government basically has to jump through multiple hoops. They have to have a huge headache and come up with a really good justification to do what they want to do.
Okay.
Then you have something called intermediate scrutiny, and that applies to things that are less than fundamental rights. And then you have things that are you just need a reasonable basis for, and that's your lowest standard. So with free speech, the First Amendment, the government can put a restriction on if it's necessary and compelling for a compelling state interest. So for example, we'll go back to the college campus. A school could not say, you are not allowed to exercise your voice because there's no compelling reason. They haven't given you anything. It's not the most restrictive means of carrying out their government interest, right?
Right.
Let's say the week of finals, the policy is you cannot have a blowhorn outside the library during the week of finals. That would be okay because it's the government interest, the school's interest is we're an educational entity and we want the students to be able to study. Cool. It's the least narrow restrictive ways of doing it. They're just applying it to the library because obviously that's where people study. And it's for a limited time only during the finals period. So this is what we call time, place, and manner restrictions. Now, the government, even with those restrictions, even though with those exceptions, they still can only do it if it's in a content and neutral way. So they can't say everybody's allowed to be in the campus quad except for Spike's show because we don't like Spike's content. Even if the regulation...
That might happen at some point, by the way.
Oh, it probably will. That's how you know you've won.
I know. I know. I've hit the big time is when I get banned from college.
So yeah, the government basically they have to jump through a bunch of hoops, and the regulation has to apply to everybody equally, and they can't look or listen to the content in order to come up with the regulation. So they can't look at your sign and say, okay, we don't like what it says.
Okay.
They can regulate and say, Spike's business, everybody in the community who has a business, the sign can only be 10 feet tall.
Right.
But if they said everybody's sign but Spike's can only be this, it would be wrong because they're looking at the content.
Right. Okay. And a lot of these more prickly things and this is the anarchist in me coming out, the more privatization there would be, the less of these. For example, the example where you were talking about the thing with the bullhorn, I'm thinking if this were a private college, no one would even blink because that's perfectly reasonable to say no bullhorns in front of the library during finals week. And B, it's their private property, and if you don't like it, then tough. It's like, yes, I support free speech. At the same time, if someone comes into my house and says something I don't like, or just is there and I don't want them to be there, I have every right to say, get the hell out of my house, because it's my house, my private property. I don't have to, I'm libertarian in my standards. I'm pretty tolerant in what I tolerate with what people say. But for the most part, if someone, for example, we go back to the Jew thing. If someone came in and said, Jews are degenerates and, they should all be rounded up and done away with, and I would say, okay, well, you need to leave my house then, because you shouldn't be arrested for saying that, but get out of my house, right? So that was my little screed in favor of privatization. But
yeah, there. So just real quickly, one of the caveats though is that there's this contract law, right?
Okay.
So you'll very rarely find a private institution that, you get the brochure and they're showing you the campus quad and all the students studying and they look all happy and everything. You'll very rarely see a school that says, "Hi, we're a private institution. We don't believe in free speech. You don't have robust free speech here." 99% of private schools say, "Hey, come experience the free exchange of ideas where we value and uphold free speech for all." Right?
Right, of course, right.
So if they do that in some states, you actually have a private right to contract claim for basically lying. You signed the contract because they said that they'd let you have free speech. But 9 times out of 10, private institution can do what it wants because they have a First Amendment right to associate, and public institutions can't because they have this thing called the First Amendment.
Right, exactly. So it's a difference between private association and because the key difference is I'm not going to follow you down the street and put you in a cage at gunpoint for what you said. I'm just telling you to get off my land, get the hell off my lawn with that nonsense. So I came up with a couple of examples of things that are kind of happening out there. I wanted to get your input on it. I don't think an episode goes by that we don't end up talking about Donald Trump, so I'm not going to start now. He was recently on Twitter. There were two different things he was talking about, and the first thing was he was very upset at Saturday Night Live. Alec Baldwin, who does arguably the worst Donald Trump impersonation in major media, has been doing these skits where he pretends to be Donald Trump, and they make fun of him and whatever. And so Trump was on Twitter about saying, that NBC, talking about taking NBC and Saturday Night Live to court for defaming and belittling him. He said that it can't be legal, and I don't think he's going to take them to court. But if Obama were to say something like that, the right would lose their minds. Of course, Donald Trump's saying it, so it's the left losing their minds, and the right is coming up with it. But what do you say to a conservative who is? It's one thing to be a conservative. It's another thing to be like a hardcore Trump supporter at all times, no matter what he does. What do you say to a self-described limited government conservative who co-signs, for example, Donald Trump saying that he's going to see if it's legal to make fun of him?
I think people both on the right and the left are utterly insane at this point. So many people have lost critical thinking skills. I could care less about some president's R or D behind his name.
Right.
I care about the Constitution. I care about the First Amendment, which basically means at some point in time, I'm representing somebody you hate, and then the next day it's somebody that you love.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
It's much more terrifying when the president of the United States says something like that, but it also makes me more secure in my limited government beliefs. Because when I have a lot of friends that say, "Oh, we need more government to do this, this, and that," I can sit back and say, "This is why I told y'all that we don't need a bigger government." Because as much as Donald Trump wants to have a tantrum about NBC, CNN, whatever,
right,
the man can't do a damn thing about it.
Exactly.
Now, he can use his popularity and we can all go into our tantrum phase like we did last year as Americans and boycott every little damn thing. I can't even remember what we're all boycotting anymore.
Volvo. We were at Volvo. I know at one point we were boycotting Volvo, and I don't know why.
It was like H&M, Dove, Starbucks. I can't remember.
Harley Davidson.
Yeah. But at some point, it's just the reason that we have the structure that we have is so when some power-hungry guy with a small ego, and this isn't just Trump, this is probably 90% of the presidents we've had, want to shut down the media. We have something in place that says, "Oh, look, this is why we embrace capitalism, and this is why we have a First Amendment. So go sit your butt down somewhere." And the only thing Donald Trump can do is tweet about it, which is also equally hilarious and great.
Trump is more entertaining than Netflix. And so, especially because he can't do half the stuff that he's saying he wants to do, I also am not thoroughly convinced he actually wants to do those things. I think he's often just changing the subject from something he doesn't want people to talk about and making it about him again. So I think there's a lot more smart politicking than people want to admit. Something else he talked about, which was a little more nuanced and actually brought up a point that a lot of people have talked about. He has said that Twitter, Facebook, and Google are engaging in practices that are reducing the growth of his followers on those different platforms, that they know all about it and that they'll do nothing about it. I strongly doubt that that's the case, but it does bring up an interesting point, something that has happened to a lot of particularly libertarians and conservatives on social media the last couple of years, where they're getting these shadow bans, where they're getting censored, where they're getting deplatformed and removed from these these different social media venues. Alex Jones pretty much can just be on his website now. He can't be on any of the major platforms. Those are private entities, but I just wanted to get what your thoughts on that are. I have a lot of thoughts on it as well, but I wanted to get your thoughts on, sort of this widespread coordinated deplatforming by multiple venues.
Yeah, so I'll tell you that this is something that the First Amendment world is actively studying and trying to figure out. And
Right.
there's so many different strange bedfellows. The First Amendment brings so many strange bedfellows together. And you've got some that are very much believe in the principles of limited government and free markets. And so the safe answer, the natural answer is let the free market do its thing.
Right.
Just as the horse and buggy isn't going to be top dog forever, neither is Facebook. My niece makes it very clear to me that only old people use Facebook anyway. So it's already dying, right? A slow death. I guess Twitter and Instagram are the cool things now. I don't know. But I do think that the social media companies, specifically Facebook, has gotten itself into a lot of trouble. They've dug themselves into a hole that I think they're having a problem of digging out. And that is, you can't create a community that everybody's happy with. If you keep pandering to everyone's feelings, you're going to end up eventually having to censor everybody. Case in point, I'm very happy to announce that finally, I've been on Facebook now 15 years. I graduated from college in 2006. It came to Michigan State in 2004. I got banned from Facebook for about 12 hours for hate speech. I was so proud of myself. It was like, yay, finally. And I made this great argument with the Facebook person when I reached out. And I basically made a post about all the white liberal comedians that have done nothing but say the F word and make fun of gay people, and nothing happened to them. But a black man says something, and look,
with Kevin Hart, yeah.
Got to get that black man back in line, right?
Right.
So I put this out, and of course I get blocked because somebody reported me because
someone got upset about that, right?
Yeah. And I contacted Facebook, and I used their own arguments against them, and I said, "How are you going to block and censor a black woman in America, knowing full well that I am the victimized class and the patriarchy of Facebook, which is mostly run by white men and rich white women? How dare you shut down the voice of a black woman?" And they were like, okay. And they unblocked me. So
they learned a powerful lesson about banning a free speech attorney.
I mean, I thought it was great. But
it was great.
The social media companies are starting to learn and understand that they've dug themselves into a hole. I think Twitter is, from the conversations that I've had with them, I think Twitter is a lot more realistic about what they've done and trying to get out of it. Facebook, I think, is digging in. And I just think that, I think Facebook purposely wants to be regulated, and I would encourage all conservatives to push back against this. The last thing we want is the internet being controlled by the government. Now, yes, would that mean to some extent they would have to uphold the First Amendment? Yes. But it also means that we would never have internet and we could not watch stupid cat videos. So please, just, if you don't like it, don't watch it. And something else, no one's stopping you from being in your mom's basement and creating another Facebook.
And exactly. And that's a tremendous amount of faith to put in the government, that they're going to uniformly uphold free speech for everyone. I don't have that faith in the government. I am thankful, and I'm, again, an anarchist. I'm thankful that there are people like you out there actively fighting the government's natural impulse to infringe all of our rights to do anything, but especially to say anything we want. The fact that you even have to do what you're doing is sort of a proof that, given their own impulses, they would do everything they could to limit anything possible that we could say for their own devices. So to put them in charge of it, the most compelling arguments I've heard in favor of, for lack of a better word, forcing Facebook to be treated like a a public utility where they have to provide service equally and whatever, is that, for example, Facebook uses something called the Atlantic Council, the Atlantic Council that helps them determine what is or is not hate speech. And the Atlantic Council has ties to the U.S. government and to NATO, and there are people on the board that are government organizations, and Facebook gets a lot of tax breaks in different municipalities and things like that. And so people argue, Facebook is sort of not necessarily part of the government, but they're almost a protectorate of the government at this point, like a public-private partnership. And so, the government has got their the government has their clause in there telling them to censor people. That's a compelling argument that they're not truly a free market private entity. It's not a good argument to give that same government that you say is telling them to censor you, to give them even more power over Facebook. If anything, the answer would be to have them have less power. And it's like you said, let the free market do its thing. When people say, what's the best thing we can do to stop Facebook? I'm like, from censoring us, and I say, get rid of the FCC, like get rid of the things that, to get rid of things that make it harder for startups to get into that space and to compete with Facebook and to eventually replace them. That would be my answer, right?
I agree with you. I think that part of the problem is the social media companies have put themselves in a bad place on purpose. I really generally think they want to be regulated. So I don't know if you watched the hearing a few weeks ago in Congress. Part of the problem is the majority of people in Congress don't know a darn thing about tech. And you could tell through the questions that they were asking, right? It was like watching everyone's grandfather try to set up an iPhone for the
with
first
tech
time.
support. Right.
And it was like, we don't even need to worry about terrorism. We've got these people in Congress, so we're screwed, right?
Right. We're all going to die anyway. Yeah.
It's over. But if you notice, I think it was the CEO of, I think it was Twitter, but I don't remember at the moment. He said, we see ourselves as a public forum. And every First Amendment attorney in the country was like, are you freaking kidding me? We've been trying to help you out. But if you're going to hold yourself out as a certain way, if you're going to say that you're the new virtual town square, then we have no choice than to treat you in that way. So
as the town square, right? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, you can't have it both ways. They want to be a private entity when it's convenient, and they want to be this cocky, we help people register to vote and spread democracy entity when it's convenient for them. And I think they just got too big, and Facebook was cooler when it was just, college people on it and your friend's little sister couldn't friend you.
Before all the boomers got on. I didn't say that. But I love boomers. My parents are boomers. But not they're the good boomers. But anyway, I'm gonna get some comments on that. But I definitely think they want to be regulated, at least to an extent. So because again, it stops the smaller if they're regulated, so is everyone else, and they've already got themselves entrenched as the top dogs, and so of course they want to be regulated. I mean, look at who was pushing for net neutrality. It was all of the it was social media companies and all these companies that were saying, oh, the internet's going to die without net neutrality, because God knows it hasn't blossomed into what it is now without net neutrality. And of course, the fun irony there is one of the things that the social media companies said why we need net neutrality is that the internet service providers could censor people and remove them and block them from using the internet. And then for the last 2 years, that's all the social media companies have been doing, is finding people to block for saying, for using wrong speech and wrong think. So I find that funny. So that's interesting. So we have a comment from Marcus Sales, who said, Alex Jones spread obvious lies, free market idiots believe him and act on it. So I have thoughts on that, but I'll get your thoughts too.
I think 90% of what Marcus is seeing, regardless of where it's from the right, from the left, is obvious marketed lies. This is why, again, I encourage everyone to look at critical thinking skills. It goes back to Russia influenced all of us on Facebook, and this is why Hillary lost.
Yes.
First of all, if we are too lazy as Americans to do our 5th grade basic skills of know your sources, I remember in 5th grade, we had to have sources, and you had to like write up a bibliography and stuff and cite things.
Right. Show your work. Right.
Yeah. If you're too lazy to do that, then you're an idiot and you deserve what you get. Most of the things that you see are propaganda. That's what marketing is. That's what every beauty cream that sells to a woman that says, put the skin cream on your face and all your wrinkles will disappear. Guess what? That's some BS, and we buy it.
Right.
You have to be part of being a free person in this country, unfortunately, means that you can't be lazy. And if we lived in a dictatorship, we could be lazy as heck and not have to worry about anything.
Right.
But if you expect somebody else to do the homework for you, this is one of the reasons I believe that not everybody should have the right to vote. Sorry.
When you're saying everybody should have the right to vote, you mean like who are you saying? Are you saying like? Well, I'll just let you say it.
Well, I'm just saying that if people are what Marcus is basically saying is people are too dumb or too lazy to research and figure out if something is truth or a lie. But these are the same people who generally say we need to make sure everybody in America can vote. No, this is exactly why we shouldn't make sure everybody in America can vote. Because if you don't understand how to do basic research, you need to sit your butt at home.
That's a good point, though, then again, I'm an anarchist, so anytime I have these conversations, I want to red pill everyone that's listening about the fallacy that is democracy. But it is true that the people that are pushing for, that are saying people are too stupid to make their own decisions. It's like, okay, but you're also saying that they should vote. I don't think anyone should vote. Anytime that anyone says, "Oh, have you heard of this voter suppression? What do you think of this?" And I'll say, "It's a good start." Anyway, what's the other thing? Okay, here's something. I don't know if you've heard of this, but there is a game which I believe was designed to test the limits of free speech and people's reaction to it. It's a game that's coming out. I think it's coming out in February, called Jesus Strikes Back: Judgment Day. And this game, I wish I had thought to put up screenshots from this game. I should have done that. But if anyone, after the show's over, don't do it now because you're watching the show. But when it's over, go Google Jesus Strikes Back: Judgment Day, and you're going to have some fun because it's a game where Jesus teams up with Hitler and Mussolini and Chairman Mao, I think, and Putin and Donald Trump to kill gay people and illegal aliens and transgender people and social justice warriors and the shadowy elites and the central bankers, I think, which I think means the Jews. After
everybody, there's like nobody left.
Yeah, they got to kill everyone except literally basically themselves. And in addition to this, Jesus has a very voluptuous bosom that he displays with a low-cut blouse that he's wearing. Jesus. So it's a game coming out, and it was designed, I think, to anger everyone at the same time. And this website has like an FAQ section, and they're like, "This is real. Everyone thinks we're trolling. This is a real game. We have a real passion for putting this game out." So, I'm definitely going to download it when it comes out because I have to see how this plays out.
I'm not
sure. You have to, right? But so I just wanted to get your thoughts on. We were talking earlier about you have to allow all the speech. What would you tell someone who reacts the way most people are going to react to Jesus Strikes Back: Judgment Day?
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a Christian, Jesus loves him too. It is. That's the worst thing about being a First Amendment attorney right now is that a lot of the people who are pro free speech aren't really for free speech.
Right.
They just use it as a way to piss people off.
Right.
As someone who's like generally passionate about the First Amendment and all of the amazing things that it has done and what it can do, it really sucks, right? It's like having that kid brother that just constantly ruins everything.
Just ruins
And
everything, right?
but at the same time, I look at the opposite, and then there's countries where if you tried to depict Mohammed a certain way, or said something negative about Jesus, or said something negative about a certain type of person, you
Right.
could be stoned to death.
Right.
And here, I think it just makes me feel honestly more blessed that we can literally laugh about it. And then honestly, I'm so going to check out that game after a round of drinks with my girlfriends because I think it's probably going to be really funny.
It's crazy, and it's like you said. I mean, it's Nazis don't want free speech, right? Like the alt right, for the most part, and maybe so there are different levels to the alt right. There's the Trump supporting civic nationalists, whatever. They probably do support free speech for the most part. But like, for example, like the fascists, the Nazis, the people like even further over on the authoritarian spectrum that are part of the alt right, they don't want free speech. They want to use free speech to be able to say what they want right now. And if they ever actually did get power, they would immediately use, Reich speech and limit everyone's speech. But that's also true of a lot of the people on the far left who are leveraging free speech to their own devices. That doesn't stop the fact that they should be able to say that, if for no other reason than the vast majority of people should be able to listen to that and go, oh man, you guys are crazy. I want nothing to do with you. I'm glad I had a chance to hear this. As opposed to if you put them in a corner and say, no, you can't talk, you turn them into martyrs. You make people interested in what they have to say. And when my parents as a kid told me, oh, no, you don't listen to this, they're that, don't listen to them. The first thing I could do when I got an internet connection was find out what the KKK had to say. And as soon as I looked at it, I'm like, oh no, that's terrible. I have nothing to do with that. But it was because my whole life I'd been told, no, you don't want to listen to them. They're they hate us or whatever. I'm like, now I have to. It's like saying, don't look at that elephant over there. Okay. Go ahead.
And you're absolutely right. And on the flip side too, when constantly we hear minorities, and I say it all the time in my field, that look, racism still exists. And you'll get people that will say really naive things like, well, no, it's not, because you have a lot of Americans that have this romanticized version of America, and they think, there was slavery, and then Lincoln came, and then there were some people with some white hoods, but then, a man had a dream, and now all is good, right?
It's all good now. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And that's not true. And so when we have, Nazis marching in Charlottesville, or people making horrific, stupid, insensitive games, now nobody can deny it. You literally can see the Nazi in the room. You literally can see the Klansman and say, don't tell me that I'm paranoid. They're right here. And because there's still such a big segment of the population that's just got its head in the ground, and they don't want to acknowledge either the systematic racism and sexism that still exists, or they truly generally have never experienced it, so therefore it doesn't exist. And so when they see it, and that's the beauty of the internet, and now every idiot kid in America has a phone, and they're recording themselves doing the dumb things that they're doing, voila, we see how the public education system has failed us all.
That was a nice segue into that. No, but it's true. Like, so often I would hear, racism was dead until Obama fanned the flames, and I'm like,
oh yeah, I love that line.
Even when I was a hardcore conservative Obama hater, we needed, I don't know, Sarah Palin, whatever, to save us all. When I would hear that, I'm like, I'm in South Carolina. That's never been true. Like, we're very open with our racism here, and it was pretty wide open. And Obama didn't. I mean, he may have. It's true he fanned some flames, but he fanned those flames by his existence as a black guy more so than a lot of. Yes, a lot of things he said fanned flames, but just his existence as a black person in power over a lot of white people who didn't like that also fanned flames, which means that those flames were already there, and racism did exist. But like you said, you can't deny it now. Like, there's videos that you can easily look at, and whether you like it or not, they're all over your news feed of these things happening. And same thing with police brutality. So many people are, oh, that's never happened. I got pulled over once, and he gave me a warning. And it's like, yeah, no, that did happen to you. But here's now instead of saying, well, this person said this happened, which compared to the cop's testimony, a lot of people are going to defer to the authority of the cop. Now you have a video showing you what happened. And unless you're a hardcore bootlicker that's going to look for an excuse why that was okay, 9 times out of 10, those are completely, those videos that are being shared around, that's not right. Like and you can't deny it anymore. So I'm sure it's made your job harder, but has the proliferation of, like you said, every idiot having a camera, has that in some ways made your job a little bit easier to be able to say, like, this is why we need free speech, so that everyone can share what's going on and what they think about it in real time whenever they want to without someone threatening to put them in a cage for it?
It's kind of 50-50. So on one hand, my mom's a teacher, so she's constantly reminding me that, particularly when I'm dealing with younger people, Shelby, the frontal lobe isn't attached yet. So you probably had just as many dramatic emotional reactions to things, but you graduated college before people had video phones. Some of us did, but you would have paid like $5.99 for like 3 seconds of video use.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't the same. And it wasn't HD, 30 frames per second movie quality video, right?
Yeah, and like your parents would kill you and take you off the food plan if you did all that. So
right.
Different world. But at the same time, it has helped, I think, give people also a new passion for free speech without even realizing they're for it. So when I see my friends posting videos and sharing their thoughts either about the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter, so many of these things started through social media. This is people all using their freedom of expression. This is all people using the First Amendment to do your right to associate with people, to run your mouth, to offend people. All of this is because you have free speech. So it's, as much as I'm irritated by everybody equally, I'm also just so proud of Americans for doing it. So I like to say that I love free speech except on weekends. The only thing I was upset about was the NFL, because that was like my time, and then they had to make me think about work. So.
Oh, that's true, because it became like a free speech battle, which, again, we can make the whole, sports have never not been controversial. They've always had political elements to them because everyone's watching them. One could argue that maybe if you didn't want sports to be political, you wouldn't have the Department of Defense funding massive campaigns for recruitment during halftime. It's a whole other subject. One last question before I give you the floor for final thoughts. And by the way, thank you again for coming on. It's been an absolute blast having you on. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, this is fun. It's fun to talk with you because we've been friends on Facebook, I think, for like almost 10 years now, at least.
Well, I've only been on 6 years, but you were probably, I would say, really early. It's been 5 years anyway. Yeah. So I really enjoyed it. But I wanted to ask you one more thing, because again, there are 2 things we always talk about on this show, and that's Donald Trump and the police. So I think I would imagine you're in Michigan, or you're from Michigan. I would imagine you've heard of the case where a guy in, I think it was it Oakland, Michigan? Oakland County, Michigan, who he pulled up next to a police officer and he was blaring NWA's "Fuck the Police." Okay, I figured you had to know about this. So, as you know, he got arrested. His attorney, Nicholas Somberg, I think, successfully fought it in court. Not only did the I guess it was the county fight tooth and nail to try to get this guy convicted for his $583 charge, but they tried to get the attorney disbarred, and they tried to argue that the Constitution shouldn't be mentioned in court because it's not federal, or something like that. And I mean, they pulled out all the stops to try to get this guy, and it took something like 8 minutes. Roughly, I think the jury just listened to "Fuck the Police" twice and then came back and rendered their verdict. But they said not guilty, and they actually, one of them went over to the prosecutor and said, "Why did you waste our time with this?" And then the attorney celebrated by driving through the streets, blaring "Fuck the Police." Which one would. That's similar to when Donald Trump celebrated his win in the case with Stormy Daniels by going on Twitter and calling her horseface. Similar dynamics there. It's like, well, I can do it. The courts just said I could. But I just want to get your thoughts on that. Like, so I can see why a cop would be offended by that song, but we're talking about I'll just let you say it.
I think that is probably one of the best examples of why nobody should ever want a big, powerful government that's there to protect you. Period. That song is no different than a bunch of crazy drunkards back in the day that dressed as offensive Native Americans and dumped the king's tea over in the harbor, right? They were literally saying, F the police, F the king, forget y'all, right? This is what they said. And
Right.
what's great about it is that, thank God, the jury, these are your American citizens, saw the BS for what it was. And there's
Right.
two things that I have faith in at the end of the day. Americans are not going to let their speech get shut down. Now, I think it's going to get close. I think the government's going to start with words that you said at the beginning that we all know to be wrong, right?
Right.
Cleaning a lobster. And then they're going to go too far. And I don't think they're ever going to be able to take away our guns. Americans are not going to allow this nonsense to keep going. And I think that's the beauty of it, is regardless if it's Donald Trump, Barack Obama, a police officer, or somebody else, it's still us against the man. And we as the American people might fight, but you would literally have like the Black Panthers and the KKK joining forces if and when they ever came for the actual free speech rights. And I think that's what's cool about it. So
So for no other reason than to combine, than to bring together the Klan and the Black Panther Party in harmony, then that would be the silver lining to that. So no, and I agree. I mean, you've got a situation where you're talking about. So again, I always equate, there ought to be a law to people they're basically saying the police need to come and put people in cages. The idea that a song that is offensive to the police should result in you being put in a cage, it sounds more like a tantrum than an actual like belief or policy. It's like, I don't like that you think this way about me, so I'm going to do something that completely justifies your opinion about me. So I was super happy. And of course, as a living troll, an actual real life troll, I loved how the attorney immediately went out, and his client was not a libertarian free speech activist. He was like a guy that didn't like the cops. It's fine. So the attorney went and everyone now knows the words to that song, which is pretty much the same thing over and over again. But we have one more comment from we have two comments. Kayla Dank says, totally agree, Shelby. I'm not sure specifically what she was saying she totally agrees with, but we'll just assume everything. And then we have another comment from Marcus that says, those Nazis have jobs. How many of them are in HR, teachers, law enforcement, loan officers, etc.?
Probably a lot of them, Marcus. But so long as they they know how to keep their personal business out of work, let them think how they want. There are tons of people that I cannot stand, let me tell you that. But I know how to turn it off at work and turn it back on when I go out and have wine with my girlfriend. So long as they know how to do that, cool. If not, sue the heck out of them. This is America. But if you try to shut them down or get them fired, all you're doing is giving them free media attention and a really good lawyer.
That's true as well. And the flip side of that is, if I have, as an employer, see that they're doing this and go, I want nothing to do with that, and I'm within my contract limitation or whatever to fire them, that's a free association thing, right? Like I have every right. If I am employing, for example, if I was employing people and I heard that they were advocating for genocide, they're not working for me anymore because I don't want that to represent my company. So I mean but that's a separate issue from saying they shouldn't be allowed to say that. It's one thing to say, social shaming, I'm actually a big fan of. A lot of social shaming has helped to move things along. Probably the two most powerful ways to affect change are social shaming and physical violence. And so, preferable to physical violence would be to just shame people into or threaten to shame people into doing the right thing, or what you perceive to be the right thing. So I agree with that. Thank you again for being on my show. I want to give you a chance to give us any final thoughts, anything you want to say, anything you want to plug, anything you want to talk about before we let you go. The floor is yours.
I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, and I want to tell my best friend Kate that I love her and I'm thinking about her. She lost her husband to ALS on Sunday, and I'm going to Michigan tomorrow. Tony was an amazing, amazing man and gone way too soon. But I know that he's not in pain anymore. And for anybody that's suffering through anything, your family and your caregivers love you very much. And I just hope everyone kind of gets over the BS for a while and realizes that there's so many more important things happening in the world. And someone offending you is that's a luxury that we're so blessed to have.
That's a good point. Yeah, and rest in peace to Tony, and we wish you safe travels to be with his wife and to be with your friend and at the funeral and all of that. Again, it has been such a pleasure to have you on. Judging from a lot of these comments, my viewers were very happy to have you on, and are probably going to be asking for you to be on much more often. So hopefully you can join us again in the future. That would be great.
Of course, I'd love it.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you again. And if you can stick around with me during the outro, I'm just going to talk to you for a bit. But thank you again. And guys, thank you again for joining us on My Fellow Americans. Join us on every Wednesday for this show. Tomorrow on the Writer's Block, Matt Wright is interviewing, name completely escapes me, but he is an owner of a kava bar in California. Right now, California is in the process of trying to ban kava drinks, and not just that, but ban any food substance that has a dietary supplement in it, which would be say goodbye to energy drinks and a bunch of other things. So they're going to be talking about the implications of that and how they're fighting against that, because California, very often what happens in California ends up spreading everywhere else too. So as I'm sure Shelby can tell you, so that's what's going to be on the Writer's Block. Tuesday is Christmas. Merry Christmas. We are not 100% certain if we're having an episode of the Muddy Waters of Freedom on Tuesday. If we do, it's going to be an awesome show, and I will possibly be wearing a sweater, a very ugly Christmas sweater. So if for no other reason, we may end up doing the show if for only to show my sweater. And then join us again next Wednesday on My Fellow Americans. I will be interviewing Patricia Watson, and we'll be talking about her libertarian efforts in homesteading and all sorts of fun stuff. It'll be a very Patty politics post-Christmas that we'll be having on Wednesday. But thank you again for joining us. Have a great night, and God bless you.
They say about an eye for an eye in a time when the blind lead the blind. Who am I to deny I would cry when a loved one dies? I recognize that body outside, bullet holes in the body that was alive. Now confined with a chalk outline. Find out how, but you never know why. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. That's my sister, mother, father, brother, son. That's one of mine. All these tears, I close my eyes.